Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me on this Thriving Thursday. I am so excited to be here with you to share just one more week with you all around checking the culture. This week, we're going to talk about how your team needs you and what you can do as a leader to assure that you're there for your team and your team really feels valued and they feel like you are in their corner in a time such as this when often our teams are feeling burnt out, overwhelmed, and ready to get some sort of relief. For those of you all who don't know me, my name is Rashida Hatchett. I am a registered nurse and resilience strategist. I work with women who are on the rise and ready to expand, and I coach them into their next level. And I also work with organizations who are in need of a culture shift. And so that is where checking the culture came from. And today, as we talk about checking the culture, I am going to dig into 3 ways that you all as leaders can really help your team right now and things that you can do to show them that they are your top priority right now. So let's jump right in. Last night, I had the pleasure of speaking with a large number of folks who many of them identified as teachers and they were in other spaces. But part of what we talked about was how we moved back into sending our kids back to school and re-entering the workforce and really what that looked like and how it didn't go so well in some places and what happened, where the breakdowns were. So during this conversation, a lot of what we got to talk about was how did it really impact those who were the boots on the ground? We hear those conversations all the time that the people who are the boots on the ground that are doing the work are often not the ones who are asked and consulted about what it's going to look like when we have to make changes or policies that we're going to put into place. Often those folks aren't asked. As a nurse, I know this all too well. So many times, unfortunately, the majority of the times in some places, nurses aren't asked what we need, whether or not this thing that our higher ups are about to put into place are actually going to work or be feasible, or we'll have the opportunity to be able to implement them the way that they're asking us to. Most of us know the ins and outs of what's going on in our role and in our job. And so if no one asks us, hey, you think this is going to work? What's the best way to implement this? How do we put this into place so that we get the most buy-in? If you don't ask the people who are actually doing the work, you've missed your target. You've dropped the ball, and you are going to have some pretty large blind spots because you made a decision without the key players being able to be involved. Those folks who are actually going to do the work, those people who it's actually going to affect. So as we re-entered the world, a lot of things happened, and they happened in really high leadership. And not everyone was a part of the decision making around whether or not this thing that we were going to do made sense and how we were going to do it made sense. And we see that really often in our culture. We have a culture of leadership decides, everyone else complies. And that's kind of the way that we do business. What we've seen over the years is that it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. You get a lot less buy-in. You get a lot more folks who are tired, fed up, and don't wish to continue on either working with you, or they've decided that they are finished working on a project because they can't implement it properly. They don't have the tools, and they feel like they're yelling into the void. So today, when we talk about checking the culture, really want to talk about how your team needs you, and it's time to step up and to do some of those things that are team focused rather than things that have historically been focused on your patients or your customers. Last week when we talk about assessing what's happening in your team, assessing for burnout to see where folks were, because nurses are certainly burnt out. We're going to talk a little bit about Now, what do you do when you find out what happened and what's going on with your team and what needs to happen moving forward? Right now, what kind of culture would your team say that you have? Is it inclusive, diverse, steeped in authenticity, transparent? Is it wellness centered? Lots of integrity is happening. It's creating spaces for work-life harmony. Can you say that that's the type of culture that is within your organization? Decisions are made with all parties who are going to be affected included. They're not just patient focused. It's not just about the patient outcomes. When we move into leadership, we have to shift the way that we decide who is our priority. The priority of a leader is always going to be your team. And then when your team is taken care of, they're going to take care of your patients. They're going to take care of your customers. But if you are so patient focused that you've forgotten about your team, you've forgotten about those people who are helping you to create the greatness that you've got going on in your organization, you're going to miss the mark. They're not going to feel appreciated. They're not going to feel heard. They're not going to feel valued. And that's part of the reason why we've got the mass exodus that we currently have when it comes to healthcare and other industries. Nurses are leaving in droves. Why? Well, for a long time, we've been yelling into the void. For a long time, we've been asking for mandatory maximums to end nurse bullying, to not have to come to work and be assaulted by patients and then there be no recourse, to be able to take vacations, rest breaks. We've been yelling into the void because nothing's been happening. Have you as a leader shifted your focus from patient to team? Every day, are you looking to make sure that your team has everything that they need so that they can take care of your patients, so that you can create the outcomes that you want to, so you've got the patient safety measures that are in place that need to be there, and they're working? So looking at what does your team feel right now? Asking that question. And it's tough, especially in this time, because everyone feels a bit of anxiety or overwhelm. Nurses are no different. We actually are feeling things probably at a higher rate than most other people, I would say. If we're on the front lines, those nurses are dealing with a lot. Those of us who aren't on the front lines but are still working as nurses, we're still dealing with a lot. Does your team feel safe, cared for, seen, heard, valued, respected? And safety is huge right now. We've got people returning back to work. We have the vaccine and whether or not people are going to be vaccinated and if their industry is requiring it. Healthcare is requiring it all over the country. It's a requirement. And there's some back and forth about whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing. So check in the culture. Does your team feel safe right now? Have you implemented everything you can so that they feel safe in this time? Right? So we are going to dig into the 3 things that you can do right now. First one, listen. Your team is talking. They're talking on social media. They're talking to other nurses. They're talking to other team members. They are talking. They're telling you what they need. You just have to be bold enough to listen, to hear them out, to listen, to understand where they're coming from, and then to begin to make some changes around what they're asking for. Okay? So have you listened and decided that what they're telling you is important enough for you to pay attention? Or does your team still feel like they are yelling into the void? They're begging for help and they're not being heard. Okay. Listening to find a solution. Oftentimes people will tell you what they need and the solutions aren't that challenging. They just take a little bit of work. They take a little bit more deciding that this is a priority and we're going to make a shift so that my team has what they need. All right, number 2, acknowledge. Yes, you got to acknowledge what you heard, but you also need to spend some time recognizing your team, recognizing the good work that they're doing. People want to feel valued, especially now. Recognize all that they're doing, the sacrifices that they're making, and make sure that your team knows how much you appreciate everything they're doing to keep your organization moving forward. Nurses got a lot of, we're superheroes when the pandemic was in the thick of it. And a lot of that has gone away. And we don't want to be superheroes. We really just want to be able to come in and do our job in a way that feels good to us, to feel safe, to feel valued, to feel appreciated, to feel heard, to feel respected. So acknowledge those in your team, on your team, that are going above and beyond. Acknowledge the work that they're doing, what they're bringing to the table, how they are sacrificing, and all of the greatness that they are giving to your clients so that you can continue to shine as a team. All right, number 3, advocate. They told you what they wanted. You're acknowledging what you heard. You're praising them for all that they're doing. You're assuring that they feel valued and they feel heard and they feel seen. Now it's time to advocate. As a leader, you've got the ear of the higher ups. It's time to take what they need to those folks and say, this is what my team is asking for. Now, certainly we know that not anything happens usually the first time, but no real change has ever come from asking once. Be persistent in getting your team what they need, and be transparent in letting your team know what you've asked for and what the result has been. Keep it on your agenda with your supervisor every week when you go into your one-on-one. Keep it on your agenda. This is what my team needs. This is what they're asking for. This is how we can implement it. This is how we can give them what they need. Make sure that when you ask, you're not just asking and that's it, but you're asking and you're following with, this is how we can do it. This is how we can make it work. In healthcare, we often run in very organized chaos, I call it, where we know where everything's at, we know what we need to do, but we don't exactly know what's going to happen that day. So that's where the chaos comes in. When we continue to operate that way and it goes unchecked, it can create toxicity. That toxicity, gone unchecked, can create burnout. And so when you're in this place that we're in right now, where we know our teams are burnt out, we know our nurses are begging, they're asking, they're pleading for something. We know that that's happening. We have a responsibility to create some fixes. Sometimes they're temporary. Sometimes they're not things that are sustainable, but other times we can create some lasting change in the midst of chaos and in the midst of pandemic. It's time as leadership for you to step up, listen, acknowledge, advocate, and make sure that your team feels like the culture that they're working in is wellness focused. It's focused not only on the patient and the outcomes for the patient, but it's also focused on the outcome for the team. If your team doesn't feel heard, they don't feel seen, they don't feel respected, they don't feel valued, they will leave. It's only a matter of time. That's simple research. If you want them to stay and you want to retain talent, you have to shift your focus to the talent, to the great nurses that are on your staff, to the amazing team that you've created. It's time to shift your focus there so that your nurses feel as though they are valued. And when they're valued, they're going to take care of your patients, and the patient outcomes will come. They will be there. For more tips, strategies, consulting, meet me at RashidaHatchettMedia.com. Thank you all so much for being with me on this Thriving Thursday. Have an amazing Thursday, and I will see you next week, 9 a.m.